I think the folk in Vienna are still getting themselves gathered and into the meeting. And I'm just trying to keep a running commentary going on here. I hope you folks I can hear somebody. Is that you, Michael?
Karen, we will just ask for a few minutes to get settled and then we can start. Just a couple of seconds more.
So very good. Wonderful. And meanwhile, I can see Michael, and I'm going to let... actually, I'm not sure whether that's Vienna or...
This is Vienna. Yeah, this is Vienna. Hello, Karen.
Hello, how are you? Good to see everybody.
Oh, here we can see everybody. That's good. Or at least, maybe just Max. Do you mind switching? Max, you come here so that. Let me see.
Michael, is that you in Australia?
Hello.
We have Michael from Australia and Michael from Fuerteventura. Is he there? Oh, what's this?
So welcome everybody, and I think we're just about getting settled and getting going. We have 11 people who are online with us at the moment. We had a total of 19 registered, so I think we're doing very well at the moment to have a good room full of people here. Now, it looks like Michael is still on from Australia, and hopefully the sharing the handing the microphone over to other people who request to speak will work, and we'll get into that later on. But perhaps we can just come back now to the main meeting room in Vienna, and we have an agenda, and I can just share that agenda with everybody. And so that's there and available to those who have got the computer in front of them. And it just begins with our introductory remarks. Then we go on to the confirmation of the new chair of the Vienna Alliance and so on. So at this stage, I've done my best to gather folk and to get us all together across the miles. So I'd like to hand it off to whoever is chairing the meeting there in Vienna. I'm not sure who that might be, but you can go ahead and take the microphone.
Thank you, Karen. I will start. I'm Mirella Dumafrai, heading the civil society team in UNODC. And
Mirella,
yes.
This is just something for everybody, is I know you really want to watch the screen, but for the people here, if you can just look around the room as you normally would to your group, and also then preferably look in the camera.
Okay.
Just because then we can see you.
Like this, I'm looking at the camera?
Yes, that's right, that's right. Just so that the meeting is as natural as possible, that's all.
But, do you want us to go very quickly around the people who are here sitting in Vienna? And
I think so, yes.
Okay, and then maybe you let us know who is on the 11 people who joined virtually, because we don't know, at least I cannot see the names. So, okay, I've introduced myself, and we have, because the main focus of the next Crime Commission will be on terrorism, we have had the opportunity to have a colleague from the terrorism branch in UNODC, so maybe you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Elena Rigacini. I work as Policy Coordination Officer in the Terrorist Prevention Branch of UNODC. Hi to everyone.
And very quickly around the room.
I'm Ingeborg Geier from Zonta International.
Zonta International.
Marlene Parenson, International Federation of Business and Professional Women.
Elizabeth Riedel, Women's Federation for World Peace International.
Hello, Carla from African Organization.
Felix English from the African Organization in Austria.
Fabio Mauro from Vienna East.
I'm Rory Fields, Vice President of the International Association of Prosecutors.
Hello, Maximilian Edelbacher, ACUNS.
And
myself here, Billy Bakari, I will try to help you, Karen, to get this meeting going. And here on the other side, we have another colleague of ours who just joined as an intern.
Thank you. And I'm not really sure all of the folk that we have here, but we have Michael Platzer is in Fort Ventura, and Michael O'Connell is in Australia. And then we have a few others, and I asked them to write their names in the chat because I can see that there are people in the room, but I can't see their names unless they want to give me their name and say who it is. Back end, we can find out who attended later on, but right at the moment, I can only see who chats to me, and they are the ones who, Siobhan is with CE Services in California. We've got Oliver Robertson, PRI, Prison Reform Institute. I'm sorry, I don't know all of your organizations unless you write them out for me. But that's Kimberly Garth James is from California with CSU and U.S. Sentencing Commission Victims Group. And that's what we have so far, and I will introduce others as they... Oliver, thank you, is from the Penal Reform International. And as people send me information, I will read that off. Frank is from Frank Stufen from Zurich, Switzerland, IPCA. So we're gathering people from a number of different places. So as you do speak, if at all possible, Billy, is the microphone there able to be moved around the room closer to the person speaking?
We will try. It's not the cable is not too long, but we will try to get.
Yeah. Anyway, just if as best that can be done, that will help both with the recording. Also, Gillian Dell apologized she couldn't make it. She was wanting to make an intervention but can't make it now. And so I know that people do make good use of the recording later on. So if we can have the recording done fairly well, then that really helps more than those of us here. So I will hand it back to you again.
Yes, as the next item is about housekeeping matters in terms of the chair of the Vienna Alliance. I don't know if Michael Platzer, is he able to speak to say...
Let's see, we could ask Michael if he would speak. He may have, let me see if I can get Michael P. I'm inviting a Michael when there are a couple of Michaels to speak. Let's see if he can actually get online and join us. There's one Michael, but I think Michael Platzer, if you're there and if you do have a mic and you would like to speak.
Well, maybe meanwhile I can say that Michael is now spending most of his time in his house in Fuerteventura, so enjoying the sunshine. And before leaving, he passed on the ball to Max Eldebacher. There hasn't been really proper election, but I think there hasn't been also any other nomination.
Now we are legal.
So I would like to see if there's any objection to the official taking over of Michael of the Alliance. So we accuse you. But this is not Michael Platzer. Here is from Australia, no?
From Australia.
Okay, hello Australia. Unless.
Yeah, Michael Platzer did not request to speak, as far as I can see. He may not have a mic set up. I don't really know. So.
Good. So anyhow, we've finished this item, and I don't know. Shall I? Hello. We still have people coming here in the room in Vienna, but Shall we go now to the item concerning the Commission on Narcotic Drugs and the UN General Assembly, the special session that is taking place in New York in April?
Please go ahead with the agenda. You just carry on from here, the meeting, and we'll interject when necessary. Gillian Dell did make it on. I hope she can be here for a while. And so continue on. Thank you.
Well, here in Vienna is one of the next coming meeting, which is taking a lot of our time, is certainly the preparations for the UN General Assembly on drugs that is going to take place from 19 to 22nd of April. One very important event that took place in New York on 10th of February was an event which was organized by the Civil Society Task Force, because as you know, the NGO who works on drugs are working within the Vienna NGO Committee on Drugs, but they have also set up a special task force in preparation of UNGAS, and this task force includes some 31st member, Penal Reform International. I heard that One Voice is part of this task force to cover aspects related to criminal justice, but otherwise the other members represent either region or they represent themes. And they organize a very good one-day stakeholder events with the President of the General Assembly. And they had the participation at the opening also of the Secretary General and, of course, of our Executive Director, Mr. Fedotov, the President of the General Assembly, the Chair of the Board of UNGAS, who's at the moment the ambassador, the Egyptian ambassador here in Vienna, Ambassador Shama. And interestingly, there was also speaking at the opening a grassroots NGO, women from Pakistan, representing actually the need of women on the issue of addiction, because the gender perspective has not been addressed properly, and this is one of the things that will be brought at the General Assembly. And the good aspect was that from the 11 grassroots NGOs that came to this event as a speaker, 8 were women, which is quite exceptional. Very often in this kind of meeting, it's always very hard to find a balance. But here, the balance was on the other side. So this was a main milestone, and the NGOs decided on some point they would like to see in the outcome document, which is still under discussion here in Vienna for the UNGAS. There also to keep in mind on the 18th of April, so before the UNGAS itself, there will be an NGO forum. We have posted the information that application either to register as an NGO or as a speaker, actually the deadline for speaker is 7th of March, has to go online. This is all organized by DESA in New York, but all the information we have posted it through our website. We went also through the social media to share this information with you in case anyone is interested. And another milestone will be here in Vienna, the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, which will also focus a lot on the preparation of UNGAS. And this is starting on 14th of March for 10 days here in Vienna. That's all I want to say about this item. If there are any questions, just let me know.
Mirella, I have one question. You said you provide information via social media. How do you do that? Do you have a Twitter account, or how do you pump information out from your office?
Yes, UNODC has a Twitter account. It's from UNODC. It went through Facebook, and it went...
mostly Facebook.
Yeah.
Those 2 places. Okay, good to know. Thank you. So, was it possible to get a briefing by UNODC's Terrorism and Prevention branch, if we're up to that part of the agenda?
This is the next item, so we bring the mic and the camera closer to Elena. Thank you, Elena.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to Mirella, to Karen, to Michael, and now also to Max for the kind invitation. I think you don't hear very often talking about terrorism in the context of this meeting. So if you do not mind, I'd like to give a brief overview because I think it's important to put things in context. And first, I'd like to tell you, maybe to reiterate to you why it's important linking the work of civil society organizations with the UN on terrorism. Then I will tell you how the UN sees work with civil society in this area. Then I will tell you a little bit about the Terrorism Prevention Branch. All this in 8 minutes, so I will do my best. First of all, as you all know, civil society is a target of terrorism. Civil society and terrorism are unfortunately closely linked. In fact, terrorists purposely target civil society in order to create a sense of fear and terror among innocent population in order to reach its political, ideological goal. This is basically a definition. I won't say the definition because you know there are many issues in the UN with the definition, but a definition of terrorism which is generally recognized. And it puts civil society in the very center of this definition. So the main victims of terrorism are regular people, they are tourists, they are people who are walking on the street, they are young people listening to pop music concerts, etc. Another element I'd like to draw your attention to is that the number of innocent people being killed every year by terrorists is increasing. And based on statistics from the Global Terrorism Index, which is produced every year by the Institute for Economics and Peace, we are told that almost 50% of these people is private citizens, and that between 2013 and 2014, they have noted an increase of about 172% in terms of deaths among civil society. The third point that I want to make is that terrorism as a threat has been evolving in the last maybe 5 years, and it's becoming much more pervasive and diffuse than it has ever been before. In particular, it has increased the use of the internet to outreach to young people, in particular the use of the social media. In this context, is trying to infiltrate into the society, into the communities, into the families. Therefore, based on these 3 points that I just make, it is clear, I think, that without the engagement of civil society, the United Nations and also the various governments, the various member states will not be able to win this battle. So the role of civil society is really, really important in various areas, which we can maybe further discuss as we go along. With regard to the United Nations gives an important role to civil society in preventing and combating terrorism as well as violent extremism. This is mentioned in one of the key United Nations resolution on terrorism, which is the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy of 2006. In that document, the United Nations recognizes the role of civil society and encourages governments to work with non-governmental organizations, with civil society, to engage as appropriate on enhancing efforts to implement the strategy. Following resolution 2006, there are several other resolutions, several other documents, which I will not go We don't have time now to go over them, but just to mention, for example, that a recent resolution of the Security Council, Resolution 2178, on foreign terrorist fighters and on countering violent extremism, also recognizes the important role of civil society in countering the spread of extremist ideologies that are aimed at recruiting foreign terrorist fighters, and so on and so forth. Maybe worth mentioning is also the Secretary General Plan of Action to Prevent Violent Extremism that was launched, or not yet launched, but let's say presented to member states last January in New York. This plan of action envisages also an important role for civil society and asks member states to engage local communities and non-governmental actors to counter violent extremist narratives, including by empowering youth, families, women, religious leaders, cultural and educational leaders. Now, when it comes to the terrorist prevention branch of UNODC, as you may know or maybe not know, the branch is responsible for supporting member states with the ratification of 19 conventions and protocols related to terrorism, with the harmonization of the legislation of the national legislation with those 19 conventions and protocols, as well as with the resolutions, the provisions of the resolutions of the Security Council. And we also provide capacity building for the criminal justice officials in order to strengthen their ability to prevent and combat terrorism. In this context, and in line also with the United Nations overall approach to working with civil society, the Terrorist Prevention Branch is doing quite some work with the civil society organizations, especially in the context of its workshops, of its capacity building workshops. In particular, those dedicated to supporting criminal justice frameworks for victims of terrorism and preventing radicalization to violence. As we're speaking here today, we actually delivering such a workshop in Algeria. Then we also working with civil society organizations when developing or assisting member states to develop national and regional strategies to counter violent extremism. We are organizing in a few days a workshop for the Gulf Cooperation Council member states, and we are involving several civil society organizations. We also work with civil society organizations when supporting rehabilitation and integration of violent extremist offenders. This is a project which we are now developing together with our colleagues in the justice section. And civil society organizations also help us with the development of several technical assistance tools. For example, the development of the tool on victims of terrorism. Now, more recently, we held an expert working group last November on implementing effective criminal justice responses to countering violent extremism, and we have invited and actually more than 10 organizations participated in this and contributed in this workshop, and we are working together now to develop a technical assistance tool. Another area where we are doing quite a bit of work with civil society is our cooperation with national justice training institutions. They helped us to ensure sustainability of our activities on the ground by incorporating in our curricula the information that we provide from TPB. And we are working very closely now, for example, with the institute in Nigeria, but this is just one out of many institutes in several countries. And we are also strengthening our work with academic institutions and universities on several research topics. So we do very much look forward to further engagement with the Alliance and with the civil society organizations which are part of the Alliance. As you may know, the meeting, actually, as Mirella just said, the meeting of the Crime Commission from 23 to 27 May have an agreed theme which relates to criminal justice responses to prevent and counter terrorism in all its forms and manifestation, including the financing of terrorism, as well as technical assistance in support of the implementation of international conventions and protocols. We at the Terrorist Prevention Branch very much look forward to further engagement with the Alliance in that occasion. So we could also have maybe a meeting and we could discuss ways in which we could further cooperate. Well, thank you. I hope I was fast, not too fast.
You covered a lot of, this is Karen again, you covered a lot of information there, and I did have one question from the group, and then also one person is asking if we can jump back to the previous agenda item and if he can say something. But the question was, do you make a distinction between terrorism and violent extremism?
Yes, we do make a distinction. Let's say that terrorism is it's a difficult distinction, and every member state has its own definition of violent extremism. But basically, terrorism is we know already what it is. Terrorism. I mean, there are definitions which I mentioned before. There are also legal definitions of what terrorism is based on the various conventions. Violent extremism that leads to terrorism is what prepares, let's say, a person. It's the ideas that are somehow put in the mind of a person in order for the person to be radicalized and then to be ready to commit the terrorist act. So it doesn't mean that every person who's an extremist or a violent extremist will necessarily commit the terrorist act, but it's a process. It kind of focuses more on the process that comes before the commission of the act. So it's the radicalization and the ideology, and yeah, I hope it's more or less clear.
Thank you. I was just seeing if there are any other questions. Oliver may have a question, and he may be sending that to me via chat. But meanwhile, just so you know, one of the a fairly new organization that I was hoping to introduce later on is really focusing just on this, is on the capacity building of local communities in addressing, in being able to prevent the radicalization process utilizing religion. So the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy, they are doing considerable work exactly in this field. They train people, they train the locals so that it is local knowledge, but they've developed a system that is trainable, and they've worked to even diminish the kind of thinking that was being put into Saudi Arabian schools. Anyway, over the past year, they've made substantial progress in facilitating educational reform in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and a number of other things. So they're really getting at the heart of a lot of the religious radicalization process, and by helping strengthen the local religious leaders in a more hopeful sense, not a radicalized sense. But anyway, I would love to be able to give you more information about them later on, because I think they're hoping to. Are they
based in Washington? Are they based in Washington? Because we
Yes.
have worked with an organization. I think they are. Yeah, we have worked with them already in the context of a conference which we held some time ago, and we are happy to do more work. Absolutely, we're happy to do some more work.
Anyway, I think they're hoping to be, doing a side event at the Crime Commission. So that would be helpful for them and for you, I think. Frank was saying the name of this organization again. I think it's ICRD. I mean, if you're asking which organization, ICRD, it's the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy. Janice is communicating with somebody else. Okay, a question from Michael. Is kidnapping, raping, enslaving women, is that considered terrorism? Another question, I'll give you just a couple of questions, and then another one is, do you use or have considered using measures such as those for demobilizing child soldiers who are put into similar situations? I guess they're looking at how do you deal with children under 18 who join terrorist groups? Do you view them as terrorists or as victims? And are you using measures such as those for demobilizing child soldiers who are put into those situations?
So on the first question, kidnapping for ransom, I would say kidnapping for ransom when it's used to fund terrorism, definitely it's linked to terrorism. We cannot say it's terrorism, but it's definitely linked to terrorism, and therefore, you know, and it may be treated differently by the criminal justice system compared to another type of kidnapping, probably with less, let's say, with different type of consequences. Now, with regard to the other question, yes, we have some colleagues in the terrorist prevention branch, together actually with the colleagues from the justice section, which are looking exactly at the issue of children under, as you say, under 18, which are either terrorists or they've been kidnapped by terrorists and then used as you know, as human suicide bombers and things like that. So there was a workshop recently in, if I remember correctly, in the Sahel on this topic, and we are working together also with the other organizations on the issue to try to, let's say, sensitize the criminal justice system that this type of situations need to be dealt with a slightly different perspective. We are not prescribing how, because of course it depends on the situation, so every situation goes per se, but of course there are certain international norms that need to be applied in the case of children, about which not all criminal justice systems are aware of. So this is definitely a work in progress. We have started maybe a couple of months ago. So we look forward, if there are you know, organizations which are willing to work with us on this issue, we also look forward to connecting with them.
Good. On that one, I think, I don't know whether it's connected with that, but we've got a couple of other comments, just so you know, that Michael from Australia, who works with, you know, he, and Mike is jumping around, he and Professor Mark Grohusen were guests of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute in Pakistan and the Pakistan Society of Victimology. And they've got, I guess, in December, they had a conference addressing the victims' rights and victims' needs in the context of terrorism. So that whole area, you know, is a large area that civil society is concerned about. Kimberly is interested in research, to research the conditions conducive to radicalizing women, and is wondering if there's any workshops there. And I know that also, just on the side, Kimberly, that ICRD does address or help strengthen women, you know, to deter them from being radicalized. So there are resources out there, but I guess we do need to report that information more shared amongst one another. So I think from what I can see, I'm trying to read and speak at the same time, which can sometimes be difficult. I don't know about it, whether it is for you, but I think I've asked most of the questions that folk sent to me that was being sent to you. So then I can see if, just very quickly, Oliver, I don't know whether he is able to speak, and Janice also wishes to. Janice won't be. Janice, you're not logged in with your Gmail account, so I apologize. You won't be able to speak. Google Chrome requires you to log in with your Gmail account so that it can be connected in. And we use this format, just so you know, because it's fairly, we have access to it and it's fairly inexpensive and doesn't cost the hundreds of dollars a meeting that it would otherwise. So I guess we move on to the next.
Can I ask also here, the room in Vienna, any question for Elena on her presentation on? I think it's fine. We can move to the next item.
If I can get, I think it was Oliver was, Oliver, do you have an email account, a Gmail account? Because he was wanting to make some comment on the unguessed section. I'll see if I can get him online as we go on through, and then he can jump back in again later on to be able to pick up a point on that section. So meanwhile, if we have finished there with the terrorism and prevention branch, thank you very much. I think it's highly pertinent for the time prior to the commission. But now I think we will come back to Mirella for the theme and agenda of the Crime Commission itself.
Yes, thank you, Karen. The theme was actually introduced by Elena, and you have this long theme which is currently being discussed also by member states on how to address it during the commission itself, whether to split it or not into two. I think they are still discussing it, but there was one idea of having countering the financing of terrorism on one hand and addressing the threat of a foreign terrorist fighter on the other. Otherwise, I have not. I haven't seen an agenda yet for the Crime Commission. Of course, it's only on 23rd of May, so there is time. What's important here is just to remind you that whoever wants to apply for. I mean, I know you are all thinking about what side event to do, and you still have time, but there will be the application period for side event for the Crime Commission, which will be between 14th March and 9th of April. So, yeah, all the ideas are welcome. I think you know there is a special form you need to fill in, and I don't know if, as the Alliance wants to come up with joint meeting, if you want to discuss it, this is the right moment. And you want to say anything, Max, maybe?
Just a short comment. Hello. We want to do a side event on corruption, organized crime, and shadow economy, because we are a small group of researchers and practitioners, and we have found this correlation. And Michael Platzer himself wants to address the violence against girls and women in a special, maybe in connection with terrorism too. Thank you.
Thank you. And Michael, again, the Secretary General for the World Society of Victimology and Commissioner for Victims' Rights in South Australia, would be interested to collaborate to organize a side event on victims of terrorism. And he's saying that he could elaborate on Chapter 8 in the UNODC Handbook on Criminal Justice Responses to Terrorism. Okay. We seem to have lost connection with Vienna. We cannot hear you. Yeah. We lost the, Billy, we lost the sound. We have the sound back. Thank you.
You have the sound. I think we will not move it any longer. Could you hear? So you didn't hear the intervention from Zonta International?
That's correct. We did not hear that intervention. So if she would please repeat herself. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, but you have to repeat your intervention because we could not hear you properly.
It's very sensitive.
Okay.
You can just move from it.
So Optimist International and Zonta International want to apply for a side event, Women and Terrorism, but we are still in a stage to discuss what exactly we want to address in this event.
And I think also you perhaps didn't hear the information. We were concurrently speaking without realizing we were because of the sound situation. The Secretary General for the World Society of Victimology and Commissioner for Victims' Rights in Australia would be interested in collaborating to organize a side event on victims of terrorism. And that could elaborate on Chapter 8 in the ODC Handbook on Criminal Justice Responses to Terrorism. And we will get back to Oliver on UNGAS after we've dealt with this. I apologize for this, Oliver. But he's also interested in side events, conditions of prison staff, life imprisonment, and the Mandela Rules as a side event for the Commission. Now, one of the things as we're, and Oliver said they're also planning on doing side events on drug policies and on women and women prisoners in the Bangkok Rules. I can see just by the number of people who are inputting here in the chat, I know most of you don't have a computer in front of you and so cannot see, but it might be good. What I might do is set up a Facebook community for the Congress, for the Commission. So as a place where people can go and connect and talk with one another and connect with one another, but it would be through Facebook. It could be just a small community for those interested. And because I think just facilitating the communication, that would be one way to do that. So I'll set that up and send that information out, and then people can, for example, you know, the Seroptimists, if you're indicating a title, other people can then contact you about participating in that, or perhaps you might refine your topic to something that's a little bit different, so you might end up doing proposing two different sections. So that would just be a way to facilitate the communication and the networking. Michael Platzer said that France and ACONS are sponsoring a side event on girls in conflict areas and in flight. Kimberly, the U.S. Sentencing Commission is also developing a legal framework for addressing federal crimes of terrorism. So that's from the folks online. Is there anything else that would be good? Just having a place where people could network specifically on preparing for the Commission, I think would be good. Is there any other request for information or suggestion that you might have there? No. Anyway, so at least we can implement that, and especially because March 14th is coming up, and then April will come by very, very quickly. And I think that's about it for there. Then going back, then, if I may, to to Oliver's point on UNGAS, he wanted to make the point that the draft outcome document was quite negative from their perspective, and and he's wondering what are the ways that they can lobby governments on improving the language, the negative language in that document. So that may be a question for you, Marilla. I don't know what the stage of the document is or how that could be done. Is that something you'd like to answer?
Yes, thank you, Karen, and thank you for Oliver for his question. It is a very difficult process, and the outcome document is still under discussion, so it is just a draft. Maybe he's referring to the third draft that was circulated recently. My advice would be just to go through the member states themselves, possibly, I mean, friendly member states who agree on the views that Penal Reform International may have on certain issues, and try to indicate which are the points you disagree in the document or would like to see worded differently. It's a document from member states, and they are discussing it. At the international NGOs are all invited, and they can comment, but the intersessional is not really the place where the document is being discussed line by line, but they express their interest. And again, there has been a number of events, like the one I've mentioned before, the stakeholder interactive dialogue that took place on the 10th of February. And also there was an international parliamentarian event just a few days before that both had some outcome input from one from the parliamentarian, the other for civil society, that were brought to the member states that are discussing the final document on UNGAS. So there has been opportunities to influence the outcome document, which is still under discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a request from Oliver to set up an e-list. I don't have the capacity to do that, and so I please, Oliver, if you can do that, I can provide those instead of using Facebook or something like that. Some people prefer just email communications. The difficult part is integrating all of these different things. I don't personally have an e-list set up, so if somebody can do that and they would like to host that, provide that service, then that's something that could be done. So that if somebody would let me know who would like to host that e-list, then I mean, not just a list, but I guess a broadcast. What are they called? Where everybody can talk to one another by email. I don't know whether, usually what gets difficult is if everybody is emailing everybody and just has all of the emails in the BCC area, it gets a little bit messy and people can't opt out if they don't want to. So anyway, if anybody's got any thoughts about that beyond that.
Maybe if you could, Karen, if you could send us a little more information about that e-list or email that you are proposing. I was just thinking about, for example, Google Docs, which is quite useful if you want to work on different documents from different members and you want to merge those documents. Usually it's easy to work on those documents online and you don't have to save and send. It's actually just one document that everybody works on. So I'm not sure if that's what you are looking for, maybe to facilitate members to get themselves ready, but that's easily set. It's easy to set up that one. I mean, maybe we can agree on a name that we can call that email from which we can then share those documents. It's quite useful to do it that way.
Yeah, Billy, that would be actually very good, because I think actually you just triggered a thought, is that Gmail does have groups. Google does have Google Groups, and then people could opt in or opt out from that group, and so use that as the basis for email exchange and communicating rather than Facebook. So if that's what people would prefer, then is that something that you would set up, Billy, or under UNODC over there, or or is that under the Alliance? How should that be done?
Well, I mean, from UNODC, what we will try to do is to have some minutes of this meeting like we do usually, but I think it's more for the Alliance to organize this time, because it's, after all, your discussion about side event. I mean, yeah, I would suggest that.
Okay, so then maybe what I can do, I think I could set up a Google group, anyway, however that works, I'll have to figure it out, but I could set that up, and then that would allow people to share documents, Google Docs and things like that, as Billy was mentioning. So the only other thing would be is if we were to, I don't know who most wants to use which format. I could maybe poll people and just see those who are on the lists, and just get some sense of what would be the preferred method of communication for this. Anyway, so we can get that done. I will do that in the coming week or so.
Thank you, Karen.
And so I think Michael was asking, can you keep the proposals for the side events for the commissions? Because I think that we can make sure that of those that came through either on the chat and or in the meeting in the room there in Vienna, we can list those. We can list those and put them in the minutes.
Yeah.
We can make those available for everybody to review.
Sure.
So I'll make sure that any that came in through chat are emailed to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
One item was also about the informal dialogue that takes place usually with the executive director of UNODC during the Crime Commission. There hasn't been yet a date set, but we can prepare for it. That's no problem.
Very good, because I'm sure that that's something that is wanting to be continued. Well, do you know when you will get a date for that, or is that will that be last minute decision? How will that work, Mirella?
Well, usually I don't know. Was there any request or formal request? Was there any formal request?
I can't remember if there was a formal request.
So I think there should be first a formal request from the chair, and then we will set the time. So yeah, Max will probably have to write a message and to request this.
So I think we're behind you in doing that, Max.
No, I can start. No, not tomorrow. I will be off in Salzburg. I have to do it next week. Sorry.
Thank you. So I guess let me see.
I can offer you an office.
Okay.
So now I guess ideas beside the ideas for the side events for the Crime Commission, they've already been popping up throughout all of this discussion and under the terrorism section. And but if anybody else has got any more, any additions that they would like to add here before we move on to general discussion and seeing if we can get Oliver to jump in and he may want to make some comment, and then Michael O'Connell. He was going to be presenting a little bit about his organization during the member highlights of this agenda. So, any other ideas for side events or discussion on that one?
I'm member, Max Ilbach again, I'm member of the aging group here at Vienna, and maybe we do a side event on elderly as victims of crime. Maybe that can be connected even with terrorism.
Yeah. That's a very good idea. There's often a focus on young people, but it's quite disappointing that there's often not a focus on older people who are often just as vulnerable.
In connection to terrorism. So the topic of the Crime Commission.
So this. Go ahead.
You can hear us? You can hear us?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Or maybe, do you want to say again, or?
Well, it's been pointed out in the room that, you know, where is the connection between elderly people and the issue of terrorism? But I would assume, and I'm not an expert in terrorism particularly, but I assume in this terms of saying that general civil society becomes the victims of terrorism, the same must go for the elderly, simply because they are a part of civil society. So, but as I say, my concern is that the elderly are often an ignored body of people, simply because they don't really have a voice. They don't advocate very well for their position.
I think generally you can split this topic. On the one side, there is the victims theory, elderly as victims of crime. There is the question: do you include terrorism in the crime the discussion? If you don't include, then you have to split the topic: elderly as victims of crime and elderly victims of terrorism. There are different theories, you know.
And violence
Yeah.
is everywhere.
Yeah, violence is everywhere. This is the link.
So, if nobody else, we can continue the conversation about topics and side events very definitely online, and it seems like we're going to end up with a Google group and a Facebook group, so that, you know, different people can communicate one way or another. And so, if we'd like to move on, perhaps we've gone through almost everything, and I think we're just getting pretty close to closing out, with the exception of some member highlights. So, Michael in Australia, I believe you're still online, and then if you would like to see if we can hear you and tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Is this the picture that you're sending us?
Well, I tried to change the picture, which is a legacy of my failure to pack my Christmas things away.
Okay.
But I can't change the camera because it says you control the system.
Oh yes, I'm not quite God Almighty, I tell you, but this system is challenging. But anyway, so this is not Michael, but go ahead, Michael.
Okay, thank you. The World Society of Victimology had an election last year, and a new executive committee has been appointed. Those members are now identified on our new website, and I invite people to have a look at that. It's World Society of Victimology as one word.org. Our UN Liaison Committee chair for more than a decade was a man called Professor John Dusich, but he has been replaced with Professor Janice Joseph, who is known to many of you because of her association with the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences, but she has generously agreed to work with the World Society. The World Society has also determined that it will hold its triennial symposium in China, Beijing. It gives us an opportunity to raise a number of issues around human rights and victims' rights as human rights. and that will be in 2018. Between now and then, we are keen to collaborate with other people, such as my offer earlier to look at running a side event that draws attention to victims. The point that was made about elders as victims is very valid. And at the other end of the age spectrum, whilst I was in Indonesia a short time ago, their concern was not just about children as victims of terrorism in a direct sense, but also the children of terrorists who become victimized as a consequence of their association with adults who perpetrate such acts of horror. And those people are often, according to the Indonesian people I dealt with, overlooked in the conversation around who are the victims of terrorism. So I personally believe that there is a very fruitful and fertile ground for discussion, and at the side event, one of my fears, should I say, about the UNODC Crime Commission is that a lot of the conversation of criminal justice responses focuses on the need of law enforcement, as does much of the counter-terrorism, and many of the people who are impacted directly and indirectly find themselves having to fit in with the agenda set by institutions such as police and law enforcement, rather than we have a truly victim-centred approach. So they are my general observations for this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. We could tell you were a long way away. There was a little bit of a stretching of your voice, but we have you recorded, and we thank you very much for all of your work. And I think congratulations are due also to Janice. I don't mean to kind of take this up, but I did want to, I had expressed interest on behalf of the organization that I'm working with, just to tell you all a little bit about the work done, other than just what was said earlier. There's a lot to say about their working in Saudi Arabia, Syria, Pakistan, Yemen, Colombia, as well as building interfaith networks in America. So just a little bit of a tidbit to get a sense of how they're working. I'll just read one one section of their accomplishments over the past year, and that's dealing with Pakistan. So in December, they completed a pilot project that involved assessing the effectiveness of government and civil society strategies to counter the intrusion of jihadi Salafism. And that's kind of the jihadi Salafism is really it's a physical jihadism. It's a transnational religious / political ideology that is pushing physical jihadism and not more of a spiritual jihadism. So a second and related task was to determine how best to involve conservative Muslims in the development and implementation of such counters. Mainstream Muslims, the point there is that mainstream Muslims actually have no traction with the extremists. It's the conservatives that do. So the next step will involve moving beyond the pilot to conducting similar research in Yemen, Tunisia, and Morocco. And they had just in November launched 2 additional projects in Pakistan, one to prevent and mitigate sectarian violence across the country, and the other to empower women encountering violent extremism. So, and they've continued their work with madrasa reform that they initiated back in 2004. So they're still continuing to do an awful lot of work, and by working, especially targeting the strategic target of upgrading the education system so that then there are not groups and generations of people that are coming out with a thinking that is much more easily bent towards the physical jihadism or Salafism. So that's just a little bit about what ICRD is doing, but I wanted to introduce them. They're just fairly new to ECOSOC, and so they haven't been all that active, although, as noted before, they have been active internationally clearly before, and I think they participated in a counterterrorism or anti-terrorism conference in Baku a number of years ago and have worked, but they really do focus all of their efforts on developing on-the-ground activities, and so haven't spent a lot of their time getting out and getting to know people. So I'm just hoping to help people see some of their work as very valuable capacity building for this kind of counter-terrorism work, prevention of terrorism. So if is there anybody else? People asking for links to extremism and women. Oliver's mentioning the Mandela rules a number of times. There are some links provided in the chat. The chat, maybe I could encourage you next time to bring your laptops, and so you can all participate in the chat as well as so that I'm not the only one seeing all of this back and forth. But anyway, I know it's really does change the nature of the meetings. But from those of us who are not in Vienna, it really helps us feel connected and able then to communicate with one another a bit more. So at least somewhat on behalf of everybody, I haven't polled everybody, but on behalf of everybody, I thank you who are in the room for putting up with the funny sounds and the voices coming in from elsewhere. I know it definitely changes the dynamic in the room there for you, but hopefully in the bigger picture it can help us all become a bit of, through our expanded network, we can be a little bit more effective as civil society. So is there any closing remarks from anybody in the room?
Karen, maybe if I may comment on Michael's presentation about the idea, of course, to focus also on, on children as victims of terrorism, but I think we shouldn't forget the parents nowadays who are more a victim of terrorists, because it's their children who ends up in hands of jihadist group, and the whole family becomes a target while they are totally innocent, and even in terms of the kind of education they have given to their children, but their children were attracted by other sources which are completely outside of the education that the parents. So I think we shouldn't forget the parents as a victim also.
Thank you, Mirella. And any closing remarks from anybody in the room? Please step forward. We'd love to hear. There's a couple down the end of the table that we haven't heard from.
Can I just quickly support Mirella on what she said? I remember the image in Tunisia, I think, after the beach attacks, where the news agencies had gone and found the parents of the people who had actually been conducting these attacks, and these parents were completely stunned. I mean, they were sitting trying to explain and having no ability to explain, and I was left with the impression, first of all, a very shocking experience for them, and also what's going to happen to them next, because obviously the security apparatus isn't going to be very pleased with what happened, and is there going to be any comeback on the parents after the media left? So I was very interested by that.
Complex situation. And anyone else? If there is no more interventions, no more comments, again, I would like to thank Mirella and everybody there, those behind the camera as well, for helping pull this together, for the office there, for writing up all of the minutes. That's always so valuable. And also just so that you do know that people do come back in and watch this. We've had, I don't know how many we've had in the room. We still have 12 live online with us out of a total that were 20 registered, and a number of those people will come back and listen again if you need to re-listen to anything. It will be, we can provide a link to the replay, but I think the main thing will be the minutes and preparations. We will send out to everybody who's on at least, I guess we've got a couple of lists here. We've got your list in Vienna, and we've got the online list. We'll try to make sure that everybody on both of those lists has access to the Google group that will be sharing information by email, and a Facebook community that allows discussion for preparation for the commission. So we'll make sure that everybody gets that information. And beyond that, I thank you very much. And Mirella, any last comments?
Thank you, Karen, again for allowing this meeting so that we don't remain isolated here in Vienna and have all the interested parties in the world. Maybe that's not the ideal, but I think it worked definitely even better than last time. And the more people understand how to work on it, I know that Gillian Dell, who initially was willing to participate, even created a Gmail account, even only for a day, but this is possible. So again, thank you, Karen, and we'll remain in touch through, maybe as a next step, through this summary. I wouldn't call it really minutes, because we try to summarize. We would put also all the ideas that came as suggestion for side event, and then maybe people will connect among each other so that they could see, because also the number of side events are limited, and it's better to avoid duplication and ensure that merge the ideas if possible among different NGOs. Thank you very much.
Oh, and I realized we didn't make our next meeting. Should we? Minor detail. Max, any suggestions for the next meeting?
Before the Crime Commission?
Yes, in that case I would say end of April.
Yeah.
We will come with some suggestions for end of April. Definitely it has to be after August for me, but yeah.
So then just let us know, and then we'll start and set something up for that next meeting time, and that will give us a chance to finally get together. Probably, I guess if it's going to be after the close of the application for side events, so that's why the groups, the Facebook and the email groups, are going to be important for collaborating on those side events, but it will be good to get back together again before the commission itself. So yeah, let us know, and then we'll set that up, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody again, and hopefully we can get used to working this way. It's a little awkward, it's not familiar to everybody, but anyway, I think it's the time that it starts to be less helpful, we can cut it off, but so long as it's still helping us connect and work better, then thank you very much to everybody who participated online and in Vienna. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do you want, sorry, you can go.